Hello there, friends. Welcome to another episode of Brown Bags of Bibles. Scott Wakefield, lead pastor at First Christian Church, joined as always by
Mark Liebert, one of the elders at First Christian Church, Scott's partner for all things Brown Bags and Bibles.
And this is episode 12
Yes.
of World Religions and New Religious Movements. And we're going to do Nation of Islam this time.
Yeah, I hope this is interesting to people.
Yeah, it will be, I think.
We're doing these in pairs of the new religious movements because they come out of a world faith tradition. So we did Jainism and Sikhism that came out of Hinduism. Mm-hmm. Last episode we did Baha'i, and this week is Nation of Islam. Those both come out of Islam.
Yes.
Might be obvious from the name.
We will get to Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, Wicca, Scientology, nuns, atheism,
Right.
N-O-N-E-S.
Yeah, not N-U-Ns.
Yeah. So,
Nation of Islam.
intro.
Yeah. So, Scott, I knew very little before I studied from, we always have to plug Dr. Cooper's
Yes.
book.
We are using
Christianity
this format.
and new religious movements are using his book, his structure. He's very, very helpful. We add our own, but please give him credit and get his book. Came out last year. Very helpful resource. So all that to say, I didn't know hardly anything about Nation of Islam before I read his chapter on this. So it was really interesting to me.
Yeah. It's the story of re-education.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
So, introduction came out of Islam, heavily steeped in Islam, but is a particularly American black supremacy and nationalism kind of flavor.
Yeah, this
really.
is an American thing.
Yes.
So for those of you who are like, Sikhism, I don't know anything about that. That's from Hindu. Okay, Nation of Islam, this is an American thing.
Yes.
So hopefully this is helpful.
It was influenced by slavery, segregation, racism, Jim Crow laws, and African religions.
Began in 1930 in Detroit under the leadership of a man named W.D. Fard, F-A-R-D.
It's not large.
Nope.
There are only about 35,000 members today.
Yeah.
But they do have quite a bit of influence, outsized amount of influence.
Yes. So this includes famous black men that you've heard of, like Malcolm X, the boxer Muhammad Ali, and the current leader, Louis Farrakhan.
Yeah. He organized the Million Man March in 95 in D.C.
You remember that? Mm-hmm. I remember that too. Yeah. Yep. Those of you who are old enough to remember, that's a Nation of Islam focused march in 1995.
So, when it comes to the beginning of the world, reality, creation, etc., apparently they take some liberties when it comes to historical accuracy.
Well, that was my comment in the notes. I think they take some liberties because here, let's say what they believe.
Because it's said that they have no beginning or ending, and the Nation of Islam has no beginning or ending, and it's older than the sun and stars.
Okay.
So it's maybe older than matter, they would say,
Yeah.
I guess.
They claim the first people on Earth appeared 66 trillion years ago, which is interesting.
Unfathomable.
Because even out there in the world today, you look at how old the Earth is based on expanding universe, any
Whatever measure you want to give to
it's
it.
like 6 billion years.
Yes.
It's nowhere near trillion.
Yes. Some say
66 trillion.
we're up into the teens of billions.
Some do. But
13.7.
we're not to 66 trillion.
18, yeah.
Wow.
No. That's more than just an order of magnitude.
That's incomprehensible.
Yes.
Okay, these first people, though, what were they?
They were black, spoke Arabic, and their religion was Islam.
Okay.
They were ruled by 24 deities that were called scientists,
Yeah, scientists are deities.
one of whom was the supreme God. And after ruling for eons, a catastrophe occurred around 4600 BC called the Flood. Just kidding.
No, this is important. 4600 BC because now you're getting into recorded human history.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And this is where they said a catastrophe occurred. What's that catastrophe?
Well, a scientist named Yaqub, Y-A-K-U-B, engineered a devilish race out of the more superior black race, and that devilish race is a white one.
Right. This inferior white race eked out a living among the caves of Europe for thousands of years.
And Allah sent messengers to convert this white race to Islam, but they rejected it and they believed in superstitions.
Eventually, in the 1500s, the white race captured the black nation and subjugated them to slavery. In biblical terms, this is seen as the era of the man of lawlessness, which you would find in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2.
And then on July 4th, 1930, Allah manifested himself in the person of, wouldn't you know it, W.D. Fard in Detroit, Michigan.
They say at some point in the future, a mothership will appear from the sky to bring judgment upon the white race.
Yes, literally.
Yes. And this will vindicate the original black nation of Islam. So that's their creation story. That's their timeline of world history. Mm-hmm. That's their beginning. That's their origin.
Yes. Historically,
right,
there are several movements that overlapped with them and were influenced by traditional Islam. The Ahmadiyya movement?
Yeah, he mentioned
I'd never
that.
heard
He doesn't
of that.
explain what it is, but the Ahmadiyya movement in America.
The Moorish Science Temple.
He says that's the first black Islamic society in America. It was 1913 in New Jersey.
And then the Nation of Islam.
Which is the largest and most influential black Islamic society in America.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Mr. Fard.
Yeah, W.D. Fard. He, by the way, was known by countless aliases, apparently. The exact dates of his birth and death and background and nationality, not well known.
No.
In fact, not known.
No, we don't know.
However, he came to prominence in 1930 in Detroit when discrimination and racism were rampant.
You have to remember the context out of which this comes.
Yes.
It does come out of a context of discrimination and racism against blacks, no doubt.
Yep.
So his teaching focused on three things.
Allah is God, the white man is the devil, and so-called, quote, Negroes are Asiatic black people, the cream of the earth.
Mr. Fard depicted a black divinity that was superior to what he called the blue-eyed god of the white race.
Yeah.
After 3.5 years of effective ministry and many converts, he disappeared. In fact, he was literally last seen at a Chicago airport because he had been expelled from Detroit by the police. That's the last we know of him. So
Elijah Muhammad is definitely the more well-known one.
Oh, yes.
In terms of where it comes from. 1897 to 1975. Mm-hmm. Died when I was 2, maybe 3. 2. As the successor to Fard, he emphasized the connections between race and religion even more.
So he is an extremist when it comes to white bad, black good. I mean, that's the simplest way to say it.
Yeah.
He said to be black was to be Muslim, to be white was to be Christian. Like, that's it. Those are the categories.
Yeah, he had a Baptist preacher for a father, but thoroughly refused to cooperate with whites.
Right.
whatsoever.
He even rejected the Civil Rights Movement and Martin Luther King Jr.
Yes, this is key.
Because he said, when you cooperate, you just help the whites.
That's right. That's part of why MLK at the time was seen as somewhat of a traitor in some ways. Not well known at the time. Mm-hmm. But yeah. So he was a separatist. That makes sense.
Yes.
Boycotted white businesses and institutions, creating independent black ones, which becomes an important strain. Yes.
He wrote a Message to the Black Man in America in 1965, basically arguing Christianity was the religion of slavery.
The, quote, dead Jesus of the white Christians was ineffective compared to Allah, who promoted equality.
In fact, he referred to white people as devils, whom righteous people should shun.
Never learned Arabic or studied the writings of Islamic figures or visited any mosques in the Middle East.
Right, so this is important. He's not really well rooted or connected to traditional Islam.
Yeah.
He's not. And because of that, he ends up coming up with very unique ideas that fit his context and differed radically from mainstream Islam, which is why his most famous disciple broke from some of his teachings.
Yep, Malcolm X.
There you go.
Became a convert to the Nation of Islam while in prison in 47, was paroled in 52, and became its most famous spokesperson and made Nation of Islam a household name.
Yeah, you've heard of Malcolm X.
Sure.
He helped found the best-selling black newspaper called Muhammad Speaks between 1961 and 1975. And unlike his predecessor, he did become familiar with traditional Islam because he went on a pilgrimage to Mecca in 1964, and he saw what authentic Islam looks like.
Yeah, which is why he had some doubts about Elijah Muhammad's moral character and knowledge of Islam. And he realized that Orthodox Islam was less anti-white and included all races and ethnicities. So he officially left the Nation of Islam that year in 1964 in favor of mainstream Islam. However, he was assassinated only a few months later by Nation of Islam radicals.
Yeah, people who didn't like the fact that he was going mainstream. All right, next person on the scene is W.D., not Fard, but W.D. Muhammad. Born 1933, died 2008.
He was one of many sons born to Elijah Muhammad.
So born to the more radical Elijah Muhammad.
And although raised in it, had some doubts about it.
Right. So unlike his father, he was educated in the Quran and in Arabic. So as you might expect, he converts to Sunni Islam in the 60s, but eventually comes back to the Nation of Islam in the 70s.
Yeah. When his father died in 1975, he moved the Nation of Islam toward more mainstream Sunni, not Shiite, but Sunni Islam,
Right.
and permitted white people to enter the community and referred to himself as an imam. He said there were no black Muslims or white Muslims, just Muslims.
Right. So you can see he's not nearly as polarizing as his father was. He changed the name to American Muslim Mission. He called all buildings mosques, not temples. But in his effort to do this, he received strong pushback from those who preferred the teachings of his father, Elijah Muhammad. And one of those people that he excommunicated in 1977 actually became the leader of the next movement.
Louis Farrakhan.
Louis Farrakhan, born in 1933, died
Not yet.
not yet.
Died ? He originally joined the movement because of Malcolm X. Many may know that. He was a trusted disciple of Elijah Muhammad and disliked the new focus on mainstream tolerance. He reconstituted the Nation of Islam according to its traditional beliefs and practices.
Right.
Became one of the celebrated religious leaders in America, and so he brings it back. Yeah.
He's a well-known author, speaker, media personality. You've heard of Louis Farrakhan. Now, he has softened his rhetoric somewhat over time.
But he's still separatistic and Afrocentric in that sense.
Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
He may not say white people are the devil,
He won't say that publicly, no.
but comes pretty close in the beliefs and teachings in lots of ways. Religious writings.
Okay, there are only two holy books they use. Makes this simple. You got the Bible and the Quran.
Yes. And occasionally, Nation of Islam folks know some of their Bible in Old Testament terms pretty specifically.
Yeah.
Of these, there's a clear preference for the Quran, however. Elijah Muhammad called the Bible a poison book.
Yeah, not his favorite.
But did use it to offer novel interpretations and to validate his own ministry.
He taught the Quran was direct from Allah, but he wasn't that familiar with it personally.
Yeah.
So today both are used, but the preference is the Quran.
The Nation of Islam also has writings from the founders of the movement to support beliefs. W.D. Fard, Elijah Muhammad, lots of subjects from W.D. Fard, apparently math, cosmology, mythology, geography, history, all orally.
Yeah, we don't have those written down. Yeah.
Elijah Muhammad wrote Supreme Wisdom and Message to the Black Man in America, which we've mentioned. And these books articulate the standard beliefs about Nation of Islam. Specifically, they say that white devils have foisted false Christian religion upon black civilization.
I think that's the key thing.
That's
here.
the main thing.
That's the key thing, is they believe white devils have pushed a false Christian religion upon the black civilization, which makes things difficult. So what are their beliefs?
Deity, dress and diet, superior black civilization, re-education, focus on the here and now, entrepreneurship.
All right.
So when it comes to deity, W.D. Fard claimed to be God himself.
In fact, Elijah Muhammad, when he met him, stated to him, "I know who you are. You're God himself."
And the Nation of Islam claims that Fard was the Messiah of Christians and the Mahdi, M-A-H-D-I, of Muslims.
Right? But, of course, that belief is the cardinal sin for Orthodox Muslims because they believe Allah can't materialize, has no equals, Allah is one.
Yeah.
So you can see why this is anathema to the true Islamic faith, this idea of Fard being God himself.
Now, this is something that's unique that often people will recognize.
Sure.
You always can identify Nation of Islam folks
From this next thing.
because they're renowned for strict dress codes. Men always wear suits and bow ties, Women wear modest Muslim clothing with head coverings.
Members are instructed to avoid pork, alcohol, drugs, tobacco, or basically anything else that's harmful.
Yeah.
So
You'll
they look sharp.
Yeah, they do. You'll also see a lot of Nation of Islam teachers. Do they call them imams? I don't think they do. Anyway, with like sort of looks like traditional religious garb. Yeah, there's like a certain thing that they often will wear when they're out talking with people.
Okay. Another belief is in the superiority of the black civilization, which we've mentioned briefly, but let's just say a couple things here. The original black Muslims in America were united in this belief that the black race was superior to the white race.
Yeah.
And that influenced the writings of authors you may have heard about. Edward Blyden, W.E.B. Du Bois. Am I saying that right? Or is it Du Bois? Is it Du Bois?
I've heard both.
Okay.
I've heard it both ways.
Speeches for men like Marcus Garvey, another one you might have heard of. Again, this idea of the black race being superior to white was incorporated into the Moorish Science Temple, which was a black Islamic society in America, and eventually the Nation of Islam. So superiority of the black civilization, a key tenet.
Re-education.
And you mentioned that. So what do you mean by that?
The Nation of Islam rejects the political, educational, and religious systems, any and all of them that are built by whites.
Okay.
It has its own curricula, community centers, and schools. The first attempt at a wholesale education and separatism came through the Clara Muhammad School.
So you may have heard of her, Clara Muhammad.
They still operate independent schools today.
Yeah. So re-education.
Yeah, re-education against all of the wrong, bad things.
Right.
Which is to say, it's not that they incorporate nothing in the sense that we all live in a world that has buildings and we have to have money and jobs and, but the beliefs and the things that grow out that are particularly in their minds, particularly white. Yeah. They reject all of that and they have to re-educate them to how reality really works in that sense.
A fourth key tenet of what they believe is they focus not on eternity, not on future, not on heaven. They focus on the here and the now, meaning they emphasize the present over the future. The goal is meant to be achieved now rather than later.
Mental resurrection.
Yeah, not a physical resurrection, a mental resurrection.
Yeah.
It's an awakening to the truth, a realization of the truth of the world as they teach it, and then following that teaching. So this is all documented in a well-known article they put out called What Muslims Want, and it focuses on things like, as you might expect, freedom, justice, opportunity, dignity, and education, all in this lifetime. In that sense, it reminds me of liberation theology, which is about changing the social political structures that exist now, not focusing on heaven and eternity.
Right. And in a very categorical sense, the now stuff is what we're trying to achieve in salvation.
Yes.
That is salvation.
Yes. Yeah. And then you mentioned the last thing.
This is a big deal.
Is entrepreneurship or self-sufficiency, business ventures.
Yeah, we build our own things.
Yeah.
Nation of Islam emphasizes blacks founding businesses. Roots in Booker T. Washington's book, Up from Slavery. Makes sense. A black middle class has come out of slavery, poverty, and government assistance.
Certainly they have. But that helped Elijah Muhammad preside over a multi-million-dollar business empire.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's an important part of what they are known for as well.
Yeah. So some worship practices. Names are a big deal.
Yes. So the Nation of Islam is known for identity cards, changing names, and as Scott mentioned, wearing new clothes.
Yeah.
So these famous people that we mentioned all had their names changed.
Elijah Poole, apparently, is who became Elijah Muhammad. We mentioned Malcolm X, who used to be apparently called Malcolm Little. I didn't know that. Cassius Clay, this is probably the most famous by far. Cassius Clay is what we know as Muhammad Ali.
And Louis Farrakhan, that's not his original name.
Louis Walcott.
Louis Walcott. Yeah. So new name, new identity. It's a big part of what they do. There are prayers and other rituals that they follow. They are encouraged to pray 5 times a day, which is like Sunni Islam. In the beginning, though, Elijah Muhammad actually told them to pray in English, which is anathema. You only pray in Arabic to a real Muslim. And the Nation of Islam members were told to pray during Advent season against Christianity, like to pray against it. Now, today they don't. Today, that was changed to, okay, let's pray during Ramadan, during the prescribed time.
Yeah.
But there was an antithetical approach to pray against Christians. Yeah, but that's not so much what it is now.
It's interesting to me how much this really is about establishing our own race-based religion.
Yeah.
It is a race-based religion.
Oh, yeah, very much so.
And as you mentioned, like in Islam, you only say the prayers in Arabic. Like there is no other way.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, if you're someone who doesn't know Arabic, you have to learn Arabic. You have to learn at least to say the prayers, right? That's its own sort of like this is only our way based on this language or ethnicity in some sense, because it's a cultural thing that comes out of that ethnicity. This is much more tightly like about the race only.
Yeah.
Much more than perhaps I think is admitted nowadays. So points of contact.
Yeah, so let's talk about some agreement first, and then we'll talk about some disagreement.
We definitely agree that there's no blue-eyed God of the white race.
Yeah, we completely agree with that.
Jesus was most likely not very white-looking at all.
No, God is spirit.
Actually. Ironically, Jesus wasn't white.
Right, and Scott and I are not proponents of the pictures of Jesus that show him blue-eyed and fair-skinned. I mean, it's not helpful.
I just don't even care what those pictures say or don't.
I agree.
At a kind of a fundamental level, I don't care.
Right.
It doesn't matter.
Right. So we agree there's no blue-eyed God of the white race.
All right.
And so Christians can sympathize with the historically poor treatment of blacks in America, that it was sinful, it was wrong, it was rooted in a heart of evil that all of us have.
Yeah.
We agree with that. There's no excuse for things like racial bigotry, dehumanizing laws, unjust systems, or economic partiality.
Right.
We agree.
Yep. That's things all Christians, white or black,
right,
stand against, even historically, frankly.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
And so we could say a lot more about that, but I want to point you to early on in BBB, Scott and I, in fact, it was episodes 3, 4, and 5.
Which is why we call it Brown Bags and Bibles, because it was at noon.
It was at
during lunchtime.
Right.
Started at COVID world where.
Yeah. So we actually, when we began this, remember there were the George Floyd riots very soon after we began Brown Bags and Bibles in 2020. Well, we did 3 episodes on those issues, race issues effectively. And so rather than regurgitate it all now, I would encourage you, go back to episodes 3, 4, and 5 called George Floyd, Racism, Riots, and Justice, where we did our best. We're fallible. We didn't do it perfectly and certainly not well at every time, but we tried to strike a balance between truth and grace.
Sure.
So we would encourage our listeners, go back, watch those early episodes, because we talk about some race issues.
So when it comes to disagreement, apparently Dr. Cooper has quite a bit of interaction with followers of Nation of Islam.
Yeah. He says he's listened to their concerns with sympathy and patience, but then eventually he tries to move the conversation in another direction. So his point is, okay, wait a minute. It's important that you know the nature, origins, and development of Christianity in the world.
Yeah, I was thinking that throughout a few times. Like, there is a fundamental misunderstanding and sounds to me, frankly, a purposeful rewriting of actual history.
Yeah. This is where knowing history can actually be a very helpful way to engage with someone who believes these things, to know your facts. So, for example, he says Christianity has always had a wider audience than just the white man.
I'm glad
always.
you said that. Right. In fact, the white man thing is far more recently a development in the history of Christianity than I think most have any understanding about it all.
That's right. So on this point, he says the Nation of Islam's history is woefully incorrect. So, for example, the Bible was written on 3 continents: Africa, Asia, and Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. Perhaps other than Paul, and the apostles, the most important theologian in all of history is African.
Right.
And Augustine is probably the most important one we've ever had.
Right. I mean, Moses wrote in Egypt. Jeremiah was in Egypt when he wrote in Africa. The Septuagint,
Yes.
which was Jesus's Bible,
Yes.
is the Greek translation of the Old Testament. Composed where? Alexandria, Egypt.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned one of the church fathers, Augustine. So,
Almost all of them.
yeah. So Dr. Cooper points out 8 of the most influential Christian theologians who've ever lived. They lived, ministered, and died in Africa. Let's name some of these Christian fathers.
Yeah, Tertullian, Perpetua, Felicity, Clement of Alexandria, Origen of Alexandria, Cyprian, Athanasius, and Augustine of Hippo.
And Augustine of Hippo is probably the most singularly important. Yeah.
Yes.
And so furthermore, the Nation of Islam makes claims about history that they're far-fetched. Like we were talking about creation. Scholars reject that. So the first thing we would say here is know your history. Mm-hmm. Christianity is not a white man's religion.
No.
We were late
not.
on the scene.
Absolutely.
Late on the scene.
Now, it became worldwide recognized and known for factors that go way beyond just the white thing that's talked about, like the printing press.
Right. That's
and
right.
things like that made the recognition of what had already been going on for a long time before that. The recognition happened at a certain time in history, which I think is part of why the it's a white religion thing has become a thing. Not because that's the actual history.
No.
Because frankly, Christianity was worldwide way earlier than that.
Yeah.
Way earlier.
Yeah. In many ways, Europe is indebted to Africa for the spread of Christianity.
Yep.
So an article that would be helpful here, we'll just list a few points as we close out here, is from gotquestions.org. This is not Dr. Cooper. It's the article's title is Christianity a white man's religion? You can look that up. So the next 8 or 9 bullet points just come directly from that.
The first Christians were all Semitic in ethnicity and likely had light to dark brown skin.
Those are the first Christians.
Yeah. And by Semitic there, we don't just mean Jewish.
No.
We mean the ethnicity of that region and area and time, which almost all had to have light to dark brown skin.
Yeah.
Like 99%.
Point number 2, when the church began, there were Africans who responded to the gospel. You see this in Acts chapter 2, verse 10.
Which says, if you'll give me just a second here, Acts 2:10 says this. Well, it starts by a bunch of names of places, cities, Parthians, Medes, Elamites, people from these cities, residents of Mesopotamia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus, Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia, Egypt, and parts of Libya belonging to Cyrene, and visitors from Rome.
So you got Egypt and parts of Libya, clearly African. Mm-hmm. In fact, Philip shared the message of Christ with an Ethiopian official in Acts chapter 8. Mm-hmm. If you want to, you could read verse 27.
Acts 8:27 says, he rose and went, and there was an Ethiopian, a eunuch, a court official of Candace, queen of the Ethiopians, who was in charge of all her treasure. He had come to Jerusalem to worship.
So you remember, this is the one that Philip baptizes.
Yeah.
So we've named Egypt, Libya, Ethiopia, and in fact, the Ethiopian Coptic Church today traces its origin to the evangelistic work of that Ethiopian official in Acts 8.
Which is crazy.
To this day.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Church leaders like, as we mentioned, Augustine, Athanasius, Tertullian, all came from northern Africa.
Right.
Irenaeus, Ignatius, and others demonstrate the vitality in Asia in the first 3 centuries.
First 3 centuries, yeah.
Yes, which much more than people recognize. Almost, in terms of history and the known written history even, when Christianity happens, boom. It's like a humongous explosion all over the world, far more than people recognize, almost instantly.
Right. So you might not know today that Ethiopia, Libya, Egypt, and Western Asia remained firmly Christian until the Muslims came. But it was Christian to begin with.
Yeah, and before Islam, there were many African and Asian regions that were hubs of Christianity every bit as much as Europe ever has been.
That's right.
Right.
That's good history to know.
Yeah.
So why do we emphasize that? Because if you know facts about history and Christianity, it can help you have engaged in a dialogue where you point out Christianity is not the white man's religion.
And you can also say, even at the same time, I recognize that some of the history that we have has been particularly written from a perspective that might be especially continental or European, right? Because that kind of thing became, at the time, what was the standard for everything. Mm-hmm. Sure, that's been a thing, which is part of why some perception and feeling of it being a history that was written only by the whites and became a white thing. I understand how you see some of that. That makes some sense. However, the more we have in terms of information with time, which has actually been there more than we've recognized, shows us that, like we just said, it was everywhere, and Europe was not any bigger than lots of other Christian hubs.
Yeah. I was just thinking, Scott, as we close, the vision that John the Apostle receives in Revelation about those who are gathered. You can throw another verse up if you want. I was thinking of Revelation chapter 5, where it talks about you've ransomed people from every tribe and language and people and nation. You've made them a kingdom and priest to our God, and they shall reign on the earth. But the picture in heaven is of every tribe, every language, every people standing before the throne and before the Lamb worshiping. That's true Christianity.
Yeah, and it mentions tribe, language, people, nation. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, how many other ways to say?
It's pretty clear on the categories.
Yeah, it's every single way you could describe.
Yeah,
all.
Right. Yep. Or as the memory verse that we've been studying in Exodus 19 says, "For all the earth is mine." Mm-hmm. All the earth is mine. Yeah. From the beginning, Old Testament, New Testament, Christianity has never been of just the white man.
Sure.
And we say that as white men.
Yep.
Good?
Yep.